Hello and welcome to PsychBoost. In this video we'll be looking at the features of psychology as a science. So we'll be defining the terms empirical, objective, controlled and replication. We'll also talk about the correct order to carry out an investigation, and we'll define one additional term called a paradigm shift. So let's talk about some of the features of modern day psychology, which makes it a science rather than a humanity. 4 keywords we'll talk about first are empirical, objective, controlled and replication. So first of all, empirical. This means the information we gain from direct observation of subjects and participants, rather than getting our information through reasoned argument or from people's beliefs. Perhaps you have a new medical treatment for schizophrenia. Just because you believe it works, or you have a reasonable argument about why it should work, isn't enough evidence. Data has to be gained from direct observation of people taking the treatment. Another term, objective, is that data shouldn't be affected by what the experimenter wants to see. When the experimenter goes out into the world and collects their data, they need to do it in a fair, systematic way that avoids their own bias as much as possible. Because if the researcher isn't able to collect their data objectively, they've got no way of knowing whether their findings are a true reflection of real life, are valid. Another term, controlled. In an experiment, we hope to assume that any changes in the dependent variable has been a result of changes that we've made in the independent variable. However, this might not be true if there have been other variables, other extraneous variables that have affected the dependent variable. If we're not able to control these extraneous variables, it means that we haven't been able to establish cause and effect between the independent variable and the dependent variable. And another term is replication. Scientists need to be able to know that they can reproduce previous studies and then hopefully find the same results. So when conducting their own studies, scientists need to carefully record their methods that they used, standardize them between conditions, and carefully write up their procedures so it can be replicated in the future. Now, if somebody else comes along and replicates their study and finds the same results, that increases our confidence that the underlying theory is a true reflection of reality, so it is more valid. Another term we need to know is paradigm shift. Now, often it feels like science is slowly developing little bits of information and slowly growing over time. But actually, this isn't really how science tends to work. There tends to be an overarching view of how the world works, and evidence is gathered to support it. However, sometimes a new theory comes through, is generally rejected when it first appears, but evidence starts to grow for this new approach. It challenges over time the old paradigm until suddenly there's so much evidence that the old paradigm gets swept away and there's a completely new worldview. Now, the most famous paradigm shift in science is probably the Copernican revolution. Originally it was thought that the sun revolved around the earth, and observations of the movement of stars and planets were made to fit this worldview. But this was challenged by observations until there became a point where the heliocentric model couldn't be accepted anymore. The movement to the acceptance of the evolutionary theory is another paradigm shift in science. Paradigm shifts in psychology could be seen as the start of psychology with Wundt and Freud using introspection, moving away from a purely philosophical approach to understanding the mind and behaviour. A paradigm shift from psychoanalytics could be the movement into behaviourism, where the scientific method was seen as critical for the understanding of behaviour, and introspection was abandoned. The next shift could be seen as the development of the cognitive model, where ideas on thought processes that were abandoned by the behaviourists were brought back in. And the next shift is the neurobiological approach, which is attempted to demonstrate thought and behaviour as a result of interactions between biological structures, neurons and larger brain regions. Each of these paradigms, psychoanalytic, behaviourist, cognitive, neurobiological, explain behaviour in very different ways. At certain times in history, each paradigm has been dominant in its field, but each has been largely abandoned by most researchers as the new paradigm becomes dominant. Now, many researchers working on psychology base their research on a cognitive neuroscience model. One other thing to consider is how to study a theory scientifically. What should come first isn't the theory itself, but there should be an unbiased observation of subjects, and from observation of them should come questions which then result in a theory. So, for example, we might observe a range of people on a number of different days and notice as the weather seems to get hotter, people seem to get sleepier. You might then formulate a theory. As temperature increases, people start to feel more sleepy. Or the hotter the weather, the sleepier people get. From that general theory, you might construct a testable hypothesis. So this might be a large number of people fall asleep when watching a 2-hour movie when the room is 38 degrees, then fall asleep when the room is 30 degrees. We could then run that experiment empirically. Maybe have 50 participants watching the same movie at 38 degrees, and we have the same number of people in the other group watching the movie at 30 degrees. Let's say we do find that more people fall asleep in the 38 degrees group. We might write that up as a paper, being very clear about what we did, offering other researchers the chance to carry out our same experiment and see if they find the same results. We would also offer other researchers the chance to criticise our study, and if it passes through that criticism and it's replicated, we might say that there is a certain amount of validity to our answer. We also need to make sure that our answer is falsifiable, so someone could come and demonstrate that our findings were in error. For example, if I suggested that the reason that people fell asleep when the room was hotter was because ghosts came into the room and made people fall asleep, you couldn't falsify that information. You couldn't show that I was wrong in suggesting that ghosts came into the room and made people fall asleep. That doesn't mean I'm right in saying that ghosts made people fall asleep. It isn't a scientific statement because it isn't possible to falsify the idea that ghosts come in when the room is hotter and make people fall asleep. So I hope you enjoyed this PsychBoost video. Please, if you haven't already, click subscribe. And if you enjoyed this video, give me a like. If you have any questions at all, pop them in the comment box and I'll try and get back to you. If you'd like the free resources that come with this course, I put the posters and some other things into this Dropbox link. Until the next video.